So I'm not racist. I do have a serious question. In black culture or African American, I don't know what please don't get mad. I don't know the rule. In black culture, whenever something amazing happens, it seems like there's always a black lady that goes, okay. Like, how do you know, is that spontaneous? Or like, how do you decide who gets to do? Because I would love to incorporate this in my family gatherings, but I just don't know how to get it started.
Y'all, I am so excited. Because while we are talking about the AP African American Studies class that was banned in Florida, NBC got a hold of the actual curriculum, and I have been waiting to get my hands on it. So when you go to NBC.com, go to this article, scroll down and click the AP African American Studies course material. All 79 pages are here. It talks about how it is taught and what is being taught. So there are 4 units, starting with the origins of the African diaspora, freedom, enslavement, and resistance, the practice of freedom, and movements and debates. And then they go into breaking it down a little bit more, giving learning objectives and essential knowledge. But here's my favorite section, the appendix, because it gives textbooks that are being used in the classroom, as well as common texts like speeches, essays, poetry, and regular books. And what do you know? There's even talk about the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Fugitive Slave Acts, and there are also films included. This is why it's important to go digging yourself. Ron DeSantis is a liar.
More Black History time. Here are 5 things that you were probably taught about slavery in the US that aren't true at all. Number 1, Irish people were enslaved. I've heard this a few times, and it's just not true. It's definitely true that 16th and 17th century Irish immigrants who came to America were exploited, were subjected to cheap labor through indentured servitude, certainly discriminated against. But there has never been a situation where Irish people in this country were subjected to perpetual and hereditary slavery based on their race. Didn't happen. Number 2, the Civil War wasn't a war about slavery, it was a war about states' rights. This is not true. This was actually a bit of propaganda that was later perpetuated by people who wanted to paint Confederate soldiers as heroes who were fighting for Southern liberty and Southern states' rights. In actuality, slavery was a huge reason for the Civil War. It was really the key reason. If you read the Articles of Succession, you can see that slavery is mentioned no less than 21 times. Number 3, only a small percentage of white families in the South actually owned people. This is not true at all. We know from an 1860 census that 32% of white families in the South actually owned enslaved people. And in states like Mississippi, that goes all the way up to 49%. I want you to think about that. In the state of Mississippi, half of white families in that state owned people. This was not some phenomenon that was reserved for very rich white people. This was, in some states, a majority of white people who owned slaves. Number 4, the Union went to war to end slavery. When I hear people talk about the Civil War, oftentimes the South is painted as the aggressors and villains, and the North is painted as the heroes and good guys. And we have this thing where we tend to paint people like Abraham Lincoln as the heroes and the champions of Black people. In reality, Abe Lincoln, yes, was personally opposed to slavery, but he's also on record saying that if he could preserve the Union and keep slavery, he absolutely would have. It was important to Abe Lincoln and important to the Union to preserve the Union. That was what they went to war for. It was not because they believed that slavery was wrong and wanted to end it. Number 5, Black people served in the Confederate Army. I've heard this before and I want to set it straight.
You know that moment when a person says that you are not great. A person says that there is nothing about you to look up to. A person says that they have done everything that you can never do. But at the same time, they pay so much attention in what you do. And I think this is a core issue when we talk about why so many white people are so much obsessed with Black Americans. And this is something that has been scholarly looked into. We have people like Cat Williams that have talked about the main idea and the main reason as to why we see so many white people obsessed with what Black people do. There's so much in Black business. There's so much trying to put their nose in everything that Black people do. And this shows you that the world secretly observes what Black Americans are doing. And I think this is so much important because there is a thin line between jealousy and a person who hates you. Majority of these people, I don't think they hate Black people. They are jealous. Okay, they might hate them for some reasons, but we are seeing a huge amount of jealousy because Black people are controlling. Black people are now owning their voices. Black people are setting trends. Black people are reclaiming what it was taken from them. And this highlights something so profound that white people are not ready to admit. So when we try to look at their obsession with Black people, we see an aspect of insecurity looming in their lives. But you ask yourself, why are they so much insecure about Black people? What does Black people have to take about them? Brothers and sisters, stay tuned as you watch this video. We are going to discover, we are going to know the truth, we are going to know the reality. This video is for educational purposes. It is not intended to harm, to talk negatively about some group of people, but it is analytically used to educate, right? To reflect on my personal opinion in regards to this. So brothers and sisters, let's watch the video. I'm gonna be back with my thoughts in regards to this.
While it is true that maybe 1% of the Confederate Army had Black people in it, it was a very small number because in truth, Black people were actually prohibited from serving in the Confederate Army. And that was an order that came all the way down from Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate Army. He very explicitly did not want Black people serving, especially at an equal rank to white soldiers. Toward the end of the Civil War, when it became clear the South was going to lose, generals like Robert E. Lee started pleading and asking to enlist Black slaves to just increase their manpower. But it was a tiny, tiny subset. And there is even documentation to suggest that these officers who took in Black soldiers were punished. So very small number, and it wasn't like a ton of Black people were fighting for the Confederate cause. The more you know.
A lot of you guys know that I've decided that Ron DeSantis doesn't want me to know Black history. And so I've decided for the month of February to study Black history and really dig deep and learn this from the Black experience, and then make videos for you guys all month on the stuff that I've learned. So I wanted to make this video to preface these lessons that are going to be coming out starting today, actually. Now, my goal in attacking this project was not to master a bunch of facts and dates and stories and things like that, because my belief as I've studied history over the decades is that a historical event is not an isolated circumstance that happens, right? It's tied to dozens of other historical events behind it and dozens more that will come along its way. It's all woven together in this fabric that creates a story. And what I want to do is I want to understand the story of Black America. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I really want to sink myself deeply into the thoughts, the feelings, the frustrations, the triumphs, the struggles, and learn about real people in those stories and how those relate to the overall Black experience, and then be able to pass on what I'm learning to whoever else is interested. So as I started, I was also very conscious of whitewashing, and I'm familiar with how that's happened. This is the practice, of course, of writing our history in a way that favors white people and glosses over the realities of the Black experience. And I was sure I was going to learn a lot of stuff from a new perspective. However, I want to tell you that in spite of this awareness that I'd find some examples, I have been shocked at what I have found. Firstly, it was extremely difficult to even find an authentic, honest version of Black history. I had to dig down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and find Black creators and Black writers and things like that would really tell me the real story, not the whitewash one. And it's been very difficult. That's really shown me like how that story has been oppressed. Secondly, the stuff that I found literally made me sick to my stomach. I would share it in the evenings when my girlfriend came home with her, and we would literally be almost in tears talking about some of this stuff. I knew that the South was very resentful at losing the war and the economic struggles that followed because they didn't have slaves. But I didn't really realize the full extent of how racism was exemplified across the entire country, including the North and the Midwest and everywhere else. Neither did I have any idea just how bad it was, and how from the very beginnings of our country, black Americans, and up till this present moment, by the way, black Americans have been struggling to survive and thrive in a pervasively hostile and racist country. So studying our history, honestly, is an extremely difficult task, but we're called to that difficult task of realizing how our ancestors oppressed other people and created a society based on systemic racism that continues to oppress those people today. However, looking at this history, honestly, is literally the only way that we can move forward as a country and as individuals of that country. Our goal, of course, is to become more educated. It's to become more compassionate. It's to become better than our ancestors so that we don't relive their mistakes and their failures, right? So I'm going to approach this stuff in a broad stroke manner, and I'm going to try to bring people into a deeper experience of what it must be like and how it is like to be black in America. Now, this may seem like a strange project for a white man, and I understand that. How could I possibly know, much less teach, the black experience? The answer is I can't. I won't ever fully be able to know or feel what it is to be a black American. That's just a simple fact. However, my goal as a human being is to learn about other people, right? And to put myself in their shoes as best as possible and really try to understand them. And I feel like this is necessary for all of us to do. But for me, it's the white male experience. It's necessary for me to go back and study this history and take accountability for how that history has affected me in my life today, right? Like some might call that white privilege, right? Okay. It would be much the same as if we look out and there's women writing about misogyny and feminism and things like that, right? But what a power when the very people who have oppressed those women are now coming out and taking accountability for that and writing about it. Now, I ask forgiveness in advance from any of my black friends or my new black friends that hopefully I will meet, for my ignorance and for the continued mistakes I'm going to make along this journey. And I will ask a couple of things of both my black friends and my white friends as we engage in the comments in these videos. And some of these I'm sure are going to go viral just based on the past of some of my historical videos. But let's engage as a community of people. Let's be the leaders. Let's be the people who do this right. So white people, if you're like me and you're ignorant and you're like, I want to learn this stuff, then let's learn it together. But open yourselves up to asking questions. Don't feel like you're going to ask a dumb question or you're going to be attacked or this or that. And black creators, please be patient with us, because the journey from ignorance to educated is a long journey. It's a long, arduous journey. And there's lots of pockets of continued ignorance along the way, right? So be patient with us as we learn this stuff, and please chime in and teach us from your experience. That's what we really need, is for people to come together and talk about this stuff, right? So, without further ado, I'm going to end this video, and you can go see the first lesson, which is called Liberty Enlightening the World. A surprising one. I didn't think I'd start with that, but I think this will kick it off really well. Peace and love, everybody.
As a black American, I find it really funny when celebrities, even though celebrities outside the United States is not what it is here, I find it really big and funny when celebrities outside the United States think that they're bigger than the program. Y'all literally come to the land of soul, to the soul people, and you want to be big, right? We make shit move. You are not bigger to the program. My people have produced the biggest fucking artists on this planet. If you want to move, you come here. We are Simon of the United States. We make shit move. No matter how much y'all think niggas don't make shit move, we are these brand of niggas, this branch of niggas here in the United States. We make shit move. This is the land of milk and honey, soul and rhythm and blues. You ain't moving unless you move through here. You're not bigger than the program.
How many of y'all learned about Henry Adams, the black man that Frederick Douglass publicly opposed? The black man that led 30,000 black people out of the South and into Kansas in 1879. All for the purpose of founding a black nation? This is not your textbook history. Henry Adams' slave owner Nancy, she didn't let him go until Shreveport, Louisiana surrendered to the Union, just a month before Juneteenth. Yet after slavery ended, Henry figured out a way to make some money. He got his own cart, delivered beer, and had his own hauling business. But that wasn't enough for him. A little later, he made money as a woodcutter and a plantation manager. Made good money too. But that was not enough for him. It was Reconstruction, and he seen all these black men winning elections. But he realized they were pawns. The Republican Party wanted to humiliate the ex-Confederacy. And the best way to do that was to give us representation in states all across the South, without real political power. Meanwhile, the Freedmen's Bureau, that was supposed to be a way for the federal government to step in and help us become full citizens. It was supposed to be a safe place to plant our money. It was supposed to uplift us. But it was underfunded. So Henry said, that doesn't make any sense. All of this was happening while the ex-Confederates were forming secret societies aimed at regaining control of the government. These were the same people burning down our communities, the same people lynching us, but then said we brought it upon ourselves. Called us the troublemakers. Sound familiar? Henry said there's got to be more life than this. He left his business and joined the army for 3 years. That's where he became a quartermaster sergeant and learned to read and write. Then in 1870, he formed a committee. They investigated the conditions of formerly enslaved people from Virginia to Louisiana. They looked at working conditions, pay, violence, and realized we had all these black faces in high places. Yet our conditions looked bleak. Our conditions were getting worse. After a 4-year investigation, the now 500-member committee concluded that we had no other option but to leave the South. In 1874, they formed a secret fraternal society called the Colonization Council. It attracted 98,000 members in its first year. Before leaving the South, they petitioned the federal government to help improve their conditions. Didn't work. That same year, Frederick Douglass became president of the Freedmen's Bureau. Didn't work. So in 1879 and 1880, Henry Adams led 30,000 black people out of the South. They called them exodusters, and into Kansas to form a black colony. Woo! Frederick Douglass was all in his feelings. He told them Negroes to stay put, improve your conditions. But Henry and those master Negroes simply said no. They said, you ain't living the life we live. You don't see the circumstances how we see them. And we aren't waiting on a leader validated by the establishment to tell us what to do. So when I think about the legacy of Henry Adams, I think about his critique of government. I think about the research the committee did. I think about how he moved in silence. I think about how we don't even have a picture of him. And yet he's a cornerstone for black builders everywhere. There is so much more we have to do to stand on his shoulders. There has to be more to life than our conditions.
Okay, so y'all seen the video of that man passionately talking about how black Americans had no culture. I think I have something clicked in my mind regarding why the rest of the diaspora keeps saying that we as black Americans have no culture when we as black Americans clearly can see what our culture is. It's very confusing for us. And I think that part of the issue is that we do not have an immigrant story as black Americans. Black Americans are not immigrants. Black Americans are Americans. We literally were here before America was America. We were here at the inception of this country. We are Americans, period, point blank, period. But every other part of the diaspora has an immigrant story. They definitely have one when they come to America. So if you are from outside the America and you are a black person that you come from outside America, African or, Caribbean, or even like a black Brit who has an immigrant story to the UK, there is a term called cultural fossilization. It's something that I've heard immigrants, not just from the diaspora, but also Latino immigrants describe, that I never connected it to why people say black Americans don't have culture until today. Cultural fossilization is when, let's say your parents immigrated to America from Nigeria in the 80s. Okay. Whenever they did that, their culture was kind of frozen in time. So whatever culture they had in Nigeria, when they came to America, they maintained that culture, and they maintained that culture with all the other people that are around them, all the Nigerians that are around them. So their culture is like solidified, and they pass that on to their children, and that's the culture. Meanwhile, back home in Nigeria, the culture is evolving, just like black American culture is evolving. So your culture kind of gets concentrated. If you come from another place and you come to America, your culture from back home kind of gets concentrated into this one solidified culture. It doesn't evolve. It just stays frozen. That's why they call it cultural fossilization. And I've heard Latinos say this as well. Like they would have this culture, and when they go back home, they speak in ways, the slang is different, everything's different, and people are looking at them like, why are you talking like it's 1985? That's the year their parents immigrated here. So their culture stays the same. And the reason why they say that Black Americans have no culture is because our culture evolves like any culture would. Our slang evolves, our style of dress, our, music, our hairstyles, just the way that we are, our thoughts, our feelings, the way that we move, it changes because cultures evolve as time goes on. But if you came from another place, your culture didn't evolve. It stayed frozen in the time that you came here. So that, I think that's part of the reason why they say Black Americans have no culture, because their culture is like put in glass, and they do the same cultural norms that they did 40 years ago. They continue that, and they think that like, immortalization of that time and of their culture is culture. They don't see it as the evolving of a group. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's also very unfortunate, because you're seeing that you don't have the evolution of your culture. Your kids come here, and then by the second, third generation, they start to take on the characteristics and mannerisms of Black Americans because our culture stays evolving, and you don't like it. So then you lash out at us. That's just my perspective. Tell me what you think of cultural fossilization.
Every once in a while, I think about how when I was in Europe, I met several Black people. And every time I met a Black person, they were African. And every time I would ask them, where are you from? Because I'd be trying to look at their features and try to see if I see anything in me so that I could find out where I'm from. Now, I am clearly of African descent. However, I am a so-called Afro-American, and we don't know where we're from. So I ask them where they're from, and they'll tell me where they're from. Then they'll say, where are you from? And I'll say, I'm from the United States. And they're like, no, where's your family from? Like, where are you from originally? Like, where in Africa? And I would say, I don't know. And they would say, what do you mean you don't know? And I would say, well, the whole chattel slavery thing, how they took us from our homes, and now we don't know where we came from. And they would be mind boggled. They would have no idea what I'm talking about. And they're like, what? Like, really? And I'm like, yeah, you don't know about slavery? And they're like, we know about slavery, but we don't. I'm like, you don't know African Americans are people who were kidnapped from Africa and torn away from their country, their language, their people? And they would be like, no. Gosh, that's really messed up. This one guy said, that's tragic. I mean, and it is. But how is it that none of them have ever heard of chattel slavery? Like, do they think that all the Black people are here working and sending money home to their family? Like, who do they think we are? Well, clearly, I wonder, do they think we're native to the United States of America? Which the Moors would say, bingo, got it. But that is so mind-boggling to me, because how did y'all not notice 1 million people missing? Y'all ain't go, where's my cousin? Anybody seeing any of our cousins? Y'all ain't come after y'all cousins? Not one. Not one. And I met at least 10. None of them ever heard the story about Africans being stolen from Africa and sent over to the islands, over to the United States. They never heard of any of that. Somebody got some explaining to do. Now I know it's somebody on TikTok with all the answers. Give it to me. Give it to me.
So all this concept that we are talking about, we are seeing a great obsession of white people towards Black people. This is something that we are seeing happening majority of the time, right? So you understand that this concept is often discussed in terms of power, identity, and insecurity, or rather than simply curiosity. Let's get into it. Now, historically, Black people in the United States were positioned as a group. They were positioned as a group to be controlled, to be defined and managed, not simply observed, right? That legacy did not disappear with legal desegregation. As a result, many white Americans, especially those socialized within dominant cultural frameworks, have grown accustomed to seeing Black life as something to be monitored, evaluated, or corrected at the same time. When Black people assert autonomy, joy, or success on their own terms, it disrupts the long-standing expectation of oversight. Now, one reason for this obsession appears persistent is because Black culture has been central to American identity, simultaneously being denied full respect. That's music, that's language, that's fashion, humor, and creativity. All these originated from Black communities, which often shaped the mainstream culture. Yet, the people who created them are frequently scrutinized, criticized, or delegitimized. This creates a paradox. Blackness is consumed and admired, but Black people themselves are policed. Celebration is tolerated only when it is profitable, non-threatening, or controlled by non-Black institutions. So these are things that we need to factor in. And it shows you why they're always in the Black business. They're so much obsessed with what Black Americans do, with what Black people do. But at the end of the day, Black people still don't even care about it. They still go and make records. They still go and do all these great things that it is required from them. Another factor is the discomfort some white people feel when Black people thrive independently. So success without permission challenges a deeply rooted narrative that portray Black progress as dependent on white validation or assistance. So when Black-owned businesses succeed, Black communities celebrate themselves, or Black people define their own standards of beauty, intelligence, or excellence. And all this undermines the ideas of hierarchy. So for those invested, curiosity, consciously or unconsciously, in being default authority, this independence can feel like a loss of relevance or control at the same time. There is also a long history of racial comparison used to stabilize identity. Whiteness in America has often been defined not by culture, but by contrast, by what is not. When Black people exist confidently and unapologetically, it removes a reference point that some rely on to feel superior, to central. This can result in excessive commentary criticism or intrusion into Black spaces, because allowing Black people to simply be will be required confronting uncomfortable questions about self-worth and social positioning at the same time. Understand that media narratives and political narratives further intensify this fixation. Black communities are frequently portrayed as problem to be solved rather than people to be respected. So this framing encourages constant surveillance of Black spending, Black protest, Black joy, Black grief, and Black success. When Black people celebrate wins, they are often accused of exaggeration. When Black people, exaggeration, exclusion, or divisiveness, as if pride itself were an offense. Meanwhile, similar behavior in white communities is normalized or praised as confidence. There is also another thing that I need to talk about, the fear of cultural displacement. Now, demographic change and shifting power As Black influence grows globally and Black voices gain platform, independent of traditional gatekeepers, some respond with hostility, which is masked with concerns, questions about why Black people do this, or why they need their own spaces. All this often reflect anxiety rather than genuine interest. Obsession becomes a way to reassert dominance through commentary, regulation, or moral judgment at the same time. So it is important to recognize that not all attention is the same. Some white people are genuinely trying to understand and learn bias or show solidarity. However, while intention involvement can cross into intrusion when it centers white feelings, opinions, or approval rather than Black autonomy. So the issue is not awareness, but entitlement. The belief that Black life must always be explainable, accessible, or accountable to outsiders. So brothers and sisters, please let me know. So let Black people be Black people. Let Black people be Black people. That's all it needs. So let me know what you think and feel about this video. I'm your host and praise and Debunking Stories. But until then, let me see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.